Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 164A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie.
Hello.
So I love doing the A and B again. It's so exciting.
I know. So if you'd like to listen to last year's and the year before that and the year before that, you can go to 17 A and B, 70 A and B, 118, and then, of course, this year's 164.
And we will be discussing this week Genesis 18 to the end of 22. We like to not necessarily discuss the same thing over and over, so it kind of puts you in a position of the more you want to learn, the more you got to listen to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the way we're just reeling you in. So, all right. Let's just start with a few goodies that I wanted to discuss. One is when we look at Genesis 17, which was last week, we look at in Genesis 17, I think 16 to 19. It's where the Lord is telling Abraham, changing the name of Sarah and saying Sarah's going to be great nations, right? All right. So we have that, and then suddenly 3 days later, we're in chapter 18, and now what happens? The Lord is coming to what?
Appear.
Coming to appear, and is going to tell Sarah, basically, well, actually, what he says to Abraham is he says, hey, why isn't Sarah here? Now, he says, where's Sarah? But a good translation, or I should say a more accurate translation is, why isn't she here? Why isn't Sarah, who's also been promised to be a great nation like you, why isn't she here? In which he's like, she's in the tent, and then he goes and he tells again what Sarah's going to be doing. Basically, he's telling Sarah through the tent wall, hey, by the way, there was this promise. So we have where Abraham did not inform Sarah. Mm-hmm. Remember, we want to go back and look at maybe Adam and Eve, right? He got the information about guarding, and while he gave it, it maybe was a little skewed because Eve's idea, right?
But was not to even touch it.
Right, exactly. So I just see it interesting that he didn't share that information. But even more interesting is when we look a little bit further down in Genesis 17:20, there, Ishmael is given the promise of being a nation.
So we all have the promise of being many promises of being a nation.
But what we don't, I never really realized this until reading this year, was it's not until Genesis 21, 17:20, that Hagar finds it out. And guess what? The Lord has to tell her too. Yeah. And tell Ishmael.
So we have a communication issue going on.
Apparently, this is a few years that nothing's been said, or if so, Hagar's forgotten it, because when she goes out into the wilderness in chapter 21, she's crying out to the Lord. Remember, the Lord says he heard the cry of Ishmael.
Right.
And then he speaks to the mother, Hagar, and gives her the promise. So I just thought it was really interesting in reading this week that we have Abraham being told all the promises, yet the Lord comes and delivers the promises to the two women. What I love is in chapter 18, we have Yoveh, who is providing the information to Sarah. But we have Elohim, who's providing the information to Ishmael and to Hagar. Because again, we have the flesh, the judgment part, and we have the mercy of the promise. So I just really like the way the Lord is still addressing them in lovingly fashion. It's just from two different
perspectives.
Two different perspectives of the type of relationship that they're each in.
Right.
Another thing was in Genesis 19, I want to look at 19:17. It says, and it came to be when they had brought them outside that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere on the plains. Escape to the mountains, lest you be consumed. So his whole idea is do not look back. Do not look back, right?
This is to Lot?
Yeah, this is to Lot and his wife.
Ooh, Did you say that?
I don't know. Probably not. So in 19, come on guys, we're in 19, 17. You know where we are. It's this Lot thing. Okay, so yes, this is the angels speaking, or the men, whatever, these two guys speaking to Lot and his family, okay? So I'm assuming because they've grabbed them all, so I'm assuming he's like, look, listen to me, everyone. Don't look back. And then in 26, we hear, still of 19, it says, but his wife looked back and behind him, and she became a post of salt, right? We all know that, the pillar of salt.
Right.
So they're told not to look back, and they look back. When you really read this whole account, you realize that the sun has come up. It's not like the black, dark. The sun has come up. Granted, there is the judgment coming down, but the sun has risen. There's hope there. They're ushered into the town. They're in a safe place. They're literally in safety. They're being held. So to turn and look back, it's not like she's running and stuff's falling.
Right.
They're literally in safety, and she looks back. I mean, I'm understanding this is taking a little more work than just a glance back. You have
Right.
a twitch and look back. No, that's not what happened. There's a deliberate turning back. But what's so interesting is right the next verse in 27 of 19, it says, "And Abram rose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood with Yahweh, the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah." Now he's looking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, Abraham, the righteous one who prayed for them, who's not involved in this judgment, is allowed to look upon it and understand. But he is hoping because he's been praying for Lot. But Lot and his group, who's literally in the judgment, they're not permitted to look upon it. They're tied to it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
How many times in life have you looked at a fellow believer and their response to their participation or response in an event, and then maybe someone else's, and you try to judge them and make them equal? Like, well, they couldn't do that. You can't do that either.
Right.
Well, the Lord told them that they can't watch that movie, but that doesn't mean this one can't do it. Or the Lord said you can't go and
it's not
you
going
can't
to
wear that shirt, but
right.
you can.
It's kind of like a recovering alcoholic.
Ooh, great example. Right.
Doesn't need to participate or anything. Recovering from anything,
right.
like
You're
that.
too close to
You're
it.
too close to the situation.
Right. You had a relationship with that negative thing, so it's going to affect you differently than maybe someone else who doesn't have a relationship, who doesn't have an alcoholic background, who doesn't have the triggers.
Right.
Yeah. They don't have the same triggers. So their triggers they were involved in it. So these, I don't know. I'm not going to go on and speculate. But my point is, according to Scripture, we know that they are not allowed to look upon it, and Abraham looks upon it, and they're both. Those are the two views. And another thing about the way they're being set up is, Abraham, again, we have this communing part. But with Lot, it's more of a saved by the hair of your chin.
Right.
So again, what side of the coin are you on? What mercy? People say, the Old Testament God is just judgment. Well, in chapter 19, we see where he's pulling him out mercy before bringing the judgment. And not only that, we see the way the wording for Elohim and Yahweh are used in 19. And you see when he's working just with Lot, it's Yahweh. Mm-hmm. But when he talks about how he deals with the judgment, it's Elohim. The only time that Yahweh, it says that he rained down the judgment, was, in my head, is the act of preserving Lot. He's that remnant.
Right.
And I think it's Isaiah 41 or Isaiah 1, I'll have it right here, that talks about, look, if there weren't for a remnant, all of Israel would be just like Sodom and Gomorrah. And the Lord provided Lot to be a remnant so that would be the example that we have for Israel and for us. All right, another quick thing I saw was in chapter 20, and it's Abimelech.
Yeah.
Abimelech, I've had problems saying that apparently. Abimelech, when he addresses the Lord, he had no idea. The Lord comes to him in a dream. Mm-hmm. He's like, I had no idea that she was not available.
Right.
And then when we go again in the end of 22, you see where the whales, not underwater wells, but wells.
The wells.
The wells of water that cannot hold a whale. That's a really big one. And so
it's like, wow, we're jumping all the way to Jonah.
That's right.
Cam's just all over the place today.
All over the place. Wow. All right. So in those things that have water down in them, and you throw a bucket, Jack and Jill, one of those.
Yeah.
So he had dug these wells, and then there was he's telling Abimelech. Golly. He's telling Abimelech, look, these been stopped up and closed by your men. Again, what's he saying? I had no idea. Apparently he's not well informed. I don't know.
Again, we have a communication problem.
Yes, again. That seems to be also another
Well, they didn't have
thing.
Facebook. Another well I stopped up. Oh, here's another one.
You didn't see the picture? Everyone's been talking about it. So We have
Me and my boo. Selfie. Abraham didn't take any of those.
Mm-mm. God, the things that they didn't miss out on. Okay, back to where we should be. He had no idea, no idea what was going on. And after that, I appreciate that Abraham's response is, well, then let's go into covenant. He's trusting that he didn't know.
He didn't know.
But here's what's neat was, if you go back to chapter 20, you have Abimelech honoring Sarah by saying, I gave all this to your brother.
Right.
And I'm going to let you now go to, as a wife. But he doesn't go back and try to, this is to your husband. He in a very honorable way, he does not in any way tarnish her reputation or her name. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
He gives and he sustains them, and he gives them all kinds of things, but they don't go into covenant. But now he doesn't know, and I see it again as Abraham saying, I trust you, and again, remember, he's like, hey, you prayed for me, and now we have children because you prayed for us. They're it's not a bad relationship. I guess that's my point. So now they're agreeing to go into covenant, and I really appreciate the way the Lord shows this process, this growth pattern between that relationship, how tit for tat, they've helped each other, and now they're going to, these two men don't want a rift between them. Right. They don't want strife like we had with Lot and Abram's people. So they decide to go into covenant. And by them going into covenant means that each of their two groups shouldn't be fighting. Now, we know later that falls apart.
Right.
But not right now.
But not now.
With these two. These two want to be able to keep a good, strong hold in the area. And so I appreciate that. And Beersheba was the area in which was under Abimelech's area. So he stays there for a long time. He was in earlier in 14, 15, 16, he was actually in Amorites' land. Hebron was considered, the Okamar of Mara?
Yeah. Mamre.
Yeah. That actually is the area that was Amorites. So he made a covenant with them, and now he's moved over and he's making a covenant here. So we are seeing the beginning of all the covenants that are going to later be addressed with Isaac and Jacob and Israel even later as they come back.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So there doesn't, with all these stories, this year, you doing the dog talk, I think it was last week, or whenever whenever you said that Abraham was alive with the Tower of Babel when he was about 50 years old, that made me go, oh my gosh, so it's just putting everything more jumbled together, not so spread apart like I've always had it in my head. So there doesn't seem to be any language barriers with all of these people that Abraham is coming into contact with. So are these all of one language?
So let's go with the thought, let's go with the thought that the first breakdown of language wasn't 70, but it was 3 major languages.
Okay.
If you go with 3 major languages, then that literally puts everyone in this area with a similar language, and then dialects may be coming.
Right.
But a very similar language.
I don't know. It just seems like
it's a great
all
question.
Of these stories seem to be within an in-house type thing.
Yeah. Well, it really is. Even today, we keep thinking it's the whole world, but it goes back to the Middle East. That's where everything is really happening, fulfilling Scripture. And this is all there. So, today you have the Arabs. You have the Arabs, and you have the Hebrews, and they're able to still speak between the two dialects. You can still communicate. So how much of that was happening here? How much of that was in the process of this pulling apart where more dialects are happening? I don't know, but I definitely see we have the culture of, we had the Pharaoh in chapter 12 who still feared the Lord. Yeah. You have this guy who still fears the Lord.
That's what I mean. It seems to still be in-house. Right. With Abraham being the, let me show you
the one that's being pulled out.
What it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
That was my point.
Yeah. Let's move into 22 real quick. And again, when you look at the names, when you look at how it's used, in 22, you would think it all be Elohim, but it's not. It starts, you think it all be Yoveh, covenant, but it starts with Elohim.
Okay, so it starts with Elohim. How?
It says, and it came to be, it's 22:1, and it came to be that after these events that Elohim tried Abraham. Elohim.
Yeah.
And he said, Abraham, and he said, here I am. So when he addresses God the first time, it's the creator.
It's the Adam event.
Yes, it is.
Where are you? Here I am.
Yes, and he's got to pull away
Yeah.
and say, I'm the creator. Remember, Yeshua, everything was before the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to have this event. I'm going to try you and see. As the one I've pulled out, are you able to do this? Judgment. Can you, yes or no? And he says, I'm here. The next time we see in verse 7, 22:7, here I am, my son. This is Abraham saying it to his son, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is the next time we see it, it says, and that's in verse 11, but the messenger of Yoveh, okay, called him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, here I am. So it's gone from the judgment, can you do it? And then he deals with his son in a loving manner. And then the merciful one sends a messenger to go, stop him. Yes. Mm-hmm. So now he can go back in that covenant. Because Abraham was willing to go through this with his only begotten son. And that can also mean, and it is a term that's used to mean the next in line for kingship.
Right.
He is the chosen one. He's the king. He's willing to give up that dream of the seed because he's trusting that the Lord's going to provide, right? And then the last here I am has to do with that loving, committed one. And I like that. It's kind of like, will he do it far away? And then a little bit closer to see how they're interacting, Abraham and Isaac. And now he's completely involved with both of them. And it becomes personal. And that's just the same way he is. He is the God that created. He watches how we interact with man. And then he gets involved to bring us out.
Yeah.
And I just love it because it just kind of gives a feel for, again, how we can apply this to our lives. How, he may seem so distant, but he's just waiting for the invitation to come in.
Right.
And he'd like us to be obedient. And that's first to call on him and then to walk out the walk. So, again, tons of stuff still here to discuss. So that means maybe another year. But we sure do thank you for joining us. And we hope that you have a fantastic week. And I love it. We will see you on the flip side with Julie and Axe. Shalom.